First point of business is to approve the September minutes. Could I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion by Cliff, second by May. Any comments or questions about the minutes from the September meeting? Okay, so we have a motion to approve the minutes. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that's approved. Chairperson's report. So, last time, we approved the language in the document about our attendance and participation requirements. I don't want to go into that again. What I just want to do is suggest that that I looked at our bylaws, and so we have two documents. There's the law that establishes the CRB and gives us guidelines, and then there's our own bylaws. We can change the bylaws ourselves. So I'm going to suggest, and if people agree, I'll add to the bylaws that document about participation requirements and attendance, and then it would become part of the bylaws. My concern is that if we don't put something in the bylaws, something like that just becomes part of people's memory, and we got to keep track of different documents. So, anybody have any thoughts about doing that? My position, I think we should make it part of the bylaws because it's that important.
When you make the modification, can you bring them so that we can just have a visual up?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to do, is that next time I would take the bylaws, I would figure out where that goes and add it in there, maybe just at the end, or it may fit within there somewhere. But then that whole thing would be a proposal to update the bylaws. Any thoughts or responses? Hatisha?
I think that maybe we should hold off on putting on the bylaws first, because remember we talked about having an initial conversation with the individual who doesn't, so that may or may not work. So we have the conversation with the individual, and they say, you know what, I'm going to try, I'm going to do my best, and still no show. So that means we may have to revisit. And why keep changing something in the bylaws that we have to constantly be change and revisit until it's perfected?
Okay.
You understand?
Yeah.
Put it in the bylaws, and say for me, y'all have a meeting with me. Hey, Hatisha, you missed 3 meetings.
My response to that is the document that we agreed to doesn't require us to dump anybody off the board for anything. It gives us the right. It gives us the right to remove somebody if they're not living up to the expectations.
But even after the conversation...
Oh, yeah, we don't have to, no, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
so do you want to...
He changed it to make it so that it was a little bit looser than...
I just remember the purpose of the conversation was something I brought up, and people, I was like, so it may or may not work. Maybe we'll trial that if somebody doesn't hold up to their end of the bargain before we...
So you would prefer to keep that document separate for a year or something and see how it works?
Yeah, why put it into the bylaws and then it just becomes a hurdle or an obstacle to have that conversation, or from the counselor to have that conversation with the person they appointed.
Okay. Cynthia, what do you think? Were you going to say something?
Actually, what I was going to say was, I think she pretty much answered it. Because she said, for example, if it was me. So I thought you already had a person that you were going to say, is there a problem?
No.
But she answered my question in the midst of what she was saying.
But this wouldn't be effective until 2020, correct? So would there be some to add to or piggyback? Would there be coaching from November, December up into January to address the issues with the current board? Because what you're saying, do a proposal a year out. So the board is going to change. Some people's going to be coming off. Mm-hmm. So will this be one of those documents that will be forever changing?
Well, as I see it, we approved the language in that document already, so that anybody that, if anybody here says, I'm not going to do another term, we got to come back to that in a minute, by the way. If anybody says, my term's ending, I don't want another one, then we'll need a new member. starting January, and that person would be presented with that document and say, these are your obligations, because we've already agreed to that.
They just wouldn't be in the bylaws.
Hatisha's suggestion, let's not mess with the bylaws right now, let's just keep that document separate. And I would say, not just for the next couple months if we're going to do that, because we're not going to run into an absence problem in the next couple months. It's, we know that already. There aren't, people have been here. So does that make sense to people? Just hold off and we'll remember that that's a separate document? I don't know that we need it. I didn't make a motion. I'm asking your opinion about whether we should combine that with bylaws or not.
I think we should combine it with the bylaws because, as I think May just said, the end of the year, there are many people whose terms expire, and then you'll get a group of new people whenever they're approved in,
Right.
and let them know at that time, these are...
Well, they're going to know anyway. We've already approved the document.
Our
And it
administrative
takes
statement
effective
said-
January 1st, whether we put it in the bylaws or not.
So it is gonna go live
Yeah.
I don't
January 1st.
understand why we wouldn't put it in the bylaws.
Well, Hatisha's saying let's not combine it, and then what if we find something we need to change about it? She'd like to leave it separate so that we wouldn't have to change the bylaws. Lori?
I think the other part of this is that we've been having discussions on reviewing and possibly changing the bylaws. So it wouldn't make sense to add something to the bylaws now and then do something again in 2 months that changes the bylaws. I think maybe we could just do it all at once.
Okay. I don't have any problem with leaving it separate for now, and if
As long
it...
as we're implementing it, I don't think it matters at this moment in time if it's in the bylaws or just a separate thing that we implement.
And I'm okay with that, as long, I mean, I won't let us forget it, that we have that, and neither will other people at this point. So if we put it in, I'll hold off on that. Annual board training, I said, and I haven't done what I said I would do, which is I will send out an email to board members asking about Saturdays in March for a board training day. So please respond to that when you get it, because we need to, we've talked about a couple possible presenters for that. I believe that everybody, I think last time we passed out, I don't see it in this week's folder. I had a copy of it myself, but I didn't bring that other folder. There's a table that has your contact information, your phone number, your address, and your expiration date. We talked about it last time. Were there any corrections that anybody had to that, or?
Tisha made some corrections to her telephone number, so that's why I just kind of waited. To
Okay.
make sure there was nobody else with any other updates. She made it to her telephone number and her email address.
Okay, but we're assuming all the expiration dates on that are clear, so
No, it was in last month.
those of you whose term is ending, again, I don't have it in front of me, I'm sorry, but there were a few people whose term is ending in December. You should contact your counselor or the office who appointed you if you want to serve another term. And I'll send out an email asking people if they've done that.
And we, just to add, we want to do that as expeditiously as possible so that if you are not going to remain on the board, that we have a replacement January 1 so that people can start at the beginning of terms rather than in the middle of a term again where we have that same recurring issue. So the sooner the better.
I want it back.
Sooner the better, people.
Okay, administrator evaluation, we mentioned this last time. I got a couple responses from people volunteering. So of the people who volunteered, those that are eligible, so I'd like to make the motion that the board approve me. I'm automatically on there, and then Cliff and Lori will be the other two. The logic there is from the one other person that volunteered was May, and there's a weird thing in the law that basically says we have to have, just like a hearing panel, we have to have one mayoral appointee, one at-large, and one district appointee, which means I have to be on it, so there can't be another mayoral appointee on it. So it's a little bit of an odd thing in the law, but it disqualifies any other mayoral appointees from serving on that panel.
So you're saying it automatically disqualifies May?
It disqualifies May because she's another mayoral
Yeah,
appointee. So Cliff and Lori would be the other two. So I'd like to move that the 3 members of the board that would be on a panel would be Cliff, Lori, and myself. Could I have a second? Any further discussion of that? All in favor? Okay. And the other 2 are, I have sent an email to Sharon Owen at the mayor's office asking if she will serve the mayor or mayor's designee. And we're presuming it would be Sharon Owens again, which it was last year, but they can confirm that. And I sent them an email 2 days ago asking that, and to notify Steve Thompson as well and set up an appointment for the first meeting.
I have
Okay.
a question about Steve Thompson. Has he come off of the common council? Do they have someone, or is that after election in November?
That's after. They have to then appoint new chairs to the Public Safety Committee and things of that nature, so we'll know that after the fact. So that's why it's important to get my evaluation done this year and as soon as possible, so that you have, someone who has been knowing my work for the last year.
Yep.
To get it done as soon as possible.
Thank you. Okay, administrators report?
Good evening, everyone. So I bring you greetings after returning from the NACO conference in Detroit, Michigan. NACO celebrated 25 years as an entity that supports civilian oversight. And attendance at that conference was 498 other people like me that either are in oversight of jails, prisons, or police departments and things of that nature. So it was a great time, and it provided me with some insight, some encouragement, and some more knowledge. Insight and knowledge is both, but it also just reaffirmed that we still have a lot of work to do, but we can be encouraged that we're not alone. So just so everybody knows. In terms of activity reports, we have been quite busy collaborating to do many presentations throughout the city, which you'll see on your committee reports that we will be doing. And also, we received 3 new cases in the month of September, making our total number of cases for the year to be 76. August was a pretty big month with 12 cases to come in, which is the largest number of cases that we've had so far this year, but we are at 76. We will be reviewing 3 cases in executive session tonight, 2 from 2016 and 1 from 2019. So we'll discuss that. In terms of the monthly financial report, as you can see on the cover page of your green sheets, you'll see where we ended up last year in terms of the amount of money that we spent in each budget line and what we had left over. And just keep those numbers in mind so that when you're looking at the current budget and you see where we are.
What's this in red?
So that in red means that that was a deficit that we had in the training budget, but because we didn't utilize funds in other areas, we were able to take care of that. But that's why we were asking for more money in the training budget this year, so that we wouldn't have that type of situation. As years go, NACO fees increase. Also, the use of force summit sometimes increases, so we need to make sure we have enough money in training and things of that nature. Speaking of that, inside your folders, you'll see a document labeled, it's adopted by it says City Clerk's Office, and you'll see the ordinance number 559 for 2019, and that's the ordinance that gives the Citizens Review Board the $5,000 for training and training-related travel expenses that we received from JAG. As part of the police department asking for that money, and as part of me looking for grant funding, so you can see that we have been allocated those funds. So I see that as an opportunity to bring speakers in when we get ready to have our annual training day. I see it as an opportunity if a board member wants to attend the training, of us being able to provide some sort of resources to them for either hotel or something of that nature for them to attend. But we do have $5,000 available that can only be utilized in that way. So I want to point that out. The 2019 second quarter report has been distributed to all the common councilors, the police department, and the mayor and the deputy mayor. Also, corporation council. It should be up on the website as well, so feel free to look for that. So with that being said, the third quarter just ended, so I have a month to do the third quarter report, and so look forward to seeing that. In terms of outstanding cases from ops, so we still have some 2017 cases that are outstanding from ops. We still have 2018 cases, but they are getting them done. I think I received 6 cases from them this week. We are steadily moving along. They did add another person to the Office of Professional Standards, which has increased their production, per se, in that department, so we're starting to get more. That is the reason why I bring up the fact that in your folders, you will see that there's a document related to our private investigator. The current private investigator that we have, Gabe Ramos, will be retiring. Therefore, and his PI license is expiring, so therefore he does not wish to take on any more cases. So with that being said, we discussed the fact of having another private investigator being hired, and that was Virgil Hutchinson for Freeland Investigation Services. So I would like to see if we can make a motion so that we can hire Virgil Hutchinson from Freeland Investigation Services as our new private investigator to remove Gabe Ramos, as he has advised that his PI license will expire. So
So are you saying this other guy effective, because this person says 2020, 10/21 of next year?
but he does not,
Expire.
he, that's when his license expires.
Right.
But he's advising now that he's not going to renew it, and he wishes not to receive any more
Any
cases
more cases as of now?
as of now.
Okay.
So yes, we need to replace him.
And the other person that you're looking to replace him, who sits down and
So
for lack of better words, vets that person?
So I invited Peter and also Dan to meet with Virgil Hutchinson, and Peter was able to come, and so he had an opportunity to meet with Virgil and to pick his brain about a few things, and he can give you some more information.
I wanted to hire him immediately. He
Does he
was
start immediately?
really impressive.
He can start immediately, but we have to make a vote, and I have to then so after this meeting, if you make a motion to go ahead and hire him, then what happens is I have to then go before the council and ask the council to approve, to remove Petrie, and then to approve him, and then we can start utilizing him from now until the end of the budget, and it kind of reoccurs that way.
So if someone would like to make that motion, and then if other people have questions or want more information about him, we could do that.
I make the motion.
Motion to approve Virgil Hutchinson. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Cliff, second. Okay. You will find the letter right past the Gabe Ramos letter. It's from him. Gives some of his background. He was on the Syracuse Police Department for 27 years and worked for the DA's office. My impression in talking to him is that he would very thorough, very able to explain himself, understood the issues that the CRB deals with. I had no doubts at all that he would be competent in doing those investigations and be supportive of the CRB's work. So I just very positive impression.
Peter, can I ask, just prejudice?
Sorry?
Did you pick up on any prejudice? Seeing that he's an ex-former retired.
He spoke about the police department in very respectful terms and with an awareness of what might be some of the deficiencies of the police department.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, for now. Yes.
Actually, it doesn't really answer mine because I personally see what they call it, conflict of interest.
So, if I could just speak to that.
Sure,
So
you can.
If we have a board member that is a previous police officer, and we're able to do that, then and so we have Dan on the board, who's an ex-police officer, and if you don't feel like that creates any sort of prejudice with regard to us or the police department, then I foresee them on a similar playing field in terms of their experience with the police department, even though one would be longer and one would be at a different time frame. But if you don't foresee that that's an issue, then I don't see why it would be an issue with him. Some criticisms that we could receive in the past are related to the fact that our private investigators that we currently have do not have that type of law enforcement background. So how can they understand the mind state of police officers and things of that nature and the things that they go through? So with that being said, that kind of, in my mind, discredits the naysayers as to why we would want them. And I think that it's an added resource to the board with regard to understanding the current department.
And add credibility as well.
Okay.
I agree with what you're saying without a doubt. But I didn't know Dan. So
Okay.
that's a whole nother story.
Okay.
But I'll give you a taste of the wine.
Okay. And that's what we're trying to make sure that people understand, that we are looking for credible resources. We are looking for people that can help and assist us with understanding the police department and also understanding law enforcement as a whole. I believe, based upon his experience of being with the police department, working also with the DA's office, he's kind of seen both sides of the fence.
Sure.
In terms of that. So it helps. I believe it's a twofold assistance for us. I mean, we'd like to have somebody who is an ex-sheriff for things of that nature as well. But as of right now, that opportunity hasn't presented itself. So this is the best that we have, which I think is a great choice.
Ready.
Well said.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor of approving Virgil Hutchinson as a private investigator for the CRB?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Cynthia, I didn't see you vote. Are you abstaining?
I'm sorry,
Are you abstaining? I didn't see you vote.
because first, no, I don't approve. And so, but the approvals are more than the no approvals.
So you're abstaining or you're voting no?
That second word, that first word you said.
Abstaining?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
okay, thank you.
Anybody else abstaining?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Anything else from the administrator report?
Yes, I believe so. One more thing I think we have. Nope, I think that's actually it. We'll talk more about some other things that we have going on in our committee reports, and it'll touch base on some of the other documents that you have in your folder that we'll discuss.
Okay, committee reports. Community outreach.
So as you can see on the agenda, we have a bunch of different presentations coming up. We will do a presentation at Hillbrook for all the the youth that are currently there with regard to knowing their rights and to answer some questions that they may have with regard to anything. We'll also be doing some presentations to TNTs throughout the city. This SPD forum that's scheduled for 10/18 has been moved to November, so you'll see it on there. We also will be doing a presentation to students that are through the LGBTQ program through SU with our former board chair, Mallory Livingston. That is going to be next week on the 11th. I'll be doing a presentation to the students explaining what the CRB is and things of that nature. And as we know and we've heard, the department is trying to draft a LGBTQ policy. And so we'll kind of talk about some of those things, and she'll continue to keep me in the loop as to what is happening with regard to that. She did invite me to go to one of the sessions, which is later on in this month, and as soon as I get the date, I will let you guys know. Anybody who is able to come to the TNTs, especially if it's on your side of town, that would be great.
That's 6 to 7 p.m.?
Yeah, they range based upon the different area TNTs, what time they start. So the times will change. They're not all at 5:30.
And where is it at?
It's at the west side, and I believe I can give the exact thing, but I want to say it might be at St. Lucy's or it's at La Liga. I can't remember which one it is, but I can make sure that I get it out to you in enough time. Just confirming the places. So again, I encourage you to come and attend with me, and be available to show the diversity of the board and to answer any questions.
I see one for downtown, too.
I know, I
Yes.
was looking at that.
Yep.
That's on the 16th.
It's going to be in the atrium. That's the downtown TNT, right in the same building where our office is. We'll have that as well.
And then what is SPD forum?
That's the ones that the mayor and the chief does, that they do throughout the city after the whole use of force policy change, and just giving each side of town the ability to tell them what their concerns are related to the police.
Is there a
in their
topic for
neighborhood.
this forum?
There hasn't, I haven't seen it. Again, it got moved to November, so as soon as I know a little bit more, I'll let you know, so that one is off.
Okay, board development and training,
Can we go back?
I'm sorry, Lori?
Just, I did some research on the tents,
Yes, I would like you to
and
talk about
that's
that.
in the community outreach.
Yes.
10 by 10, and I thought that would be the size. I wasn't sure if that last one was 8 by 8 or 10 by 10. They actually run anywhere from $70 to $300, depending on what you buy. The one that has the best reviews is a commercial tent, and it would probably suit our purposes the best. It also has the ability to put a sign in it,
Okay.
so you can say that you know who you are. It also comes with a carry bag with wheels and 4 sandbags
Oh,
to hold them down.
How much?
For the tent?
Yeah, which we learned at Mary's event
Yeah.
when the heavens opened and the winds blew, that Cliff and I have trouble holding that down if it's really windy out. But and that's $149 on Amazon. So the others are, one was 110, it didn't have sandbags. One was 79, I don't even know if it has a bag. But I would make a recommendation or a motion that we purchase the one from Amazon at $149.
Nice and sturdy one?
Yeah.
Could we have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Thank you.
Approved unanimously. Okay, Board, anything else on community outreach? Board developments, as I said, I'll be sending out a poll for March training dates. Government relations, Renette, to that.
So, we have been having communication with the police department and the corporation counsel's office related to what they believe the CRB is authorized to receive based upon their reading of the ordinance, what the ops report consists of, and what we are entitled to. So in your folders, you will see a letter, you will see a memorandum that was drafted by Kristen Smith. And then following that, you will see a letter that was drafted by our attorney in response to her memorandum advising her thoughts as to what we are supposed to receive. So based upon her receipt right before we came to this meeting, she advised that she is going to review what our attorney Ryan Susser from Bousquet Holstein has written, and then we will have a meeting related to that to kind of iron out the discussion points and the what we can all agree on to be a satisfactory compromise moving forward. I will say that in many ways the memorandum does lay out certain things that we were not receiving unless I requested it, and it says that they are going to give it to us without me requesting it. But then there's times when things are kind of like the CRB isn't going to make me do more work if we didn't receive it, and we just kind of have to iron out some of those things. As you know, based upon what has happened historically, the CRB receives whatever the Office of Professional Standards reviews in their investigation, but previously there were some kind of points of contention as to what exactly should be received in terms of body-worn camera footage, in terms of other documents. So the document that you have before you clears up some of those things, but we also still have room to make some corrections and things of that nature for them to give us some more explanations when they decide not to provide us with that. We felt that it was necessary to do it this way and to have our attorney to review it, and then for us to have a meeting with all councils to discuss it further to make sure that everybody's best interest is looked at.
I see some language of redaction in there.
Yeah, read that.
What was that?
But yes, there is some
I see
language.
that language in there.
Yes.
And I know what that means.
Yes, so there is some language of redaction in there. And if you look at our attorney's notation, he specifies that if there is to be redaction, there is supposed to be some sort of explanation as to the redaction and things of that nature. So like I said, there are certain points of contention that we need to iron out to make sure that we are receiving exactly what the Office of Professional Standards is reviewing, and if they are redacting something, we need to know why.
Right.
And then at that point in time, we can ascertain as to whether or not that is, in a sense, appropriate or not. So we are still working through this, you know, we are heading in a better direction than we were before, and we hope that this ironing out these things now creates a system that doesn't have to continue to be revisited every time we get a new corporation counsel, every time we get someone else in the Office of Professional Standards, that this is, here it is, this is what we agreed to, let's keep rolling. Like, and it's supposed to alleviate all this starting over every single time somebody decides to interpretate the law a different way. So that is the reason why we are working to get this done. Another point in terms of government relations is the police department would like us to write some sort of joint letter with them to the mayor's office, acknowledging some points that have been in our recommendations every year. We have been making recommendations with regard to the use of force policy. And some of those recommendations have been included in the current use of force policy. And it's kind of a way to say, hey, the police department has looked at the CRB's recommendations, has made these recommendations on behalf of the CRB, and then all others that have not, we have been provided with an explanation as to why it was not. Sort of like our mental health, policy recommendation, things of that nature. The letter has not been fully drafted as of yet. Once the letter has been drafted, it will be circulated between the board, and we'll make a final decision as to if that's what we do. There is a draft that I had some issues with, and because I have issues with, it needs to be redrafted. So, and again, before it is sent, it will be vetted and reviewed by our attorney's office. It will, to make sure that it is what we want to say and the points that we truly agree with to be said. So look out for emails related to that. And then we'll move on to the next committee report.
Okay, so police relations,
So we had a police liaison committee meeting on September the 12th in which Lori was able to attend. Dana was able to attend as well, in which we discussed some of the contentions that we have had related to, which is the reason why you have the memo about what is supposed to transpire between the CRB and the Office of Professional Standards. And we talked about the training that we received, and they wondered how that was received by the board when they were breaking down the recommendations that we previously made with regard to use of force. We talked about those things. We talked about continuing to have an open line of communication between our office and the police liaison committee. And Lori can talk a little bit more about that.
Not that I'm doubting you, but I'm having trouble remembering that meeting.
Okay.
and a lot of meetings.
Yeah, we've had about 5 with the police department in the last 6 weeks. This was the original.
Yes.
Wasn't Hatisha there too?
Yeah, Hatisha was there, Lori was there, Dan was there. Hatisha, you got something down there?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I thought we,
Yep.
The training, David.
that's what we spoke about this already.
I thought we did last month, but
Yeah.
maybe not. It was after last month's meeting. We're not being very helpful, I think.
Okay,
but-
no problem. So,
I do
you
remember
take notes?
some that it was, I did, but it's not, I took, these aren't with the books I had notes in. But I do remember, how it was good to hear and to know that there's a difference between when we make a recommendation for retraining, that it may not be a retraining issue or it cannot be fixed through retraining. It could be a policy issue or a procedural issue. And so it was a lot of clarification on what would be the best way for us to make recommendations moving forward and how do we successfully help in that sense.
I think the other thing that came up, that was the first time we talked about that, the joint letter, which kind of hit us as, okay, how do we do this? Do we want to do this? Is this something that we feel would help or hurt the CRB if we send a joint letter with the police? So rather than a joint letter being like, I'm not really sure what their original thought was. I mean, I'm thinking a joint letter to the community, and it's like, how do you get that out there? But it would be just a joint letter to the mayor, and then what would come from that would be discussions that if the mayor came out with anything. So our concerns were really how we were going to perceive this, and we've gone back and forth with this letter. It's had several drafts. As Renette said, we haven't necessarily agreed with all of it, and Renette's not going to sign anything that we don't agree with. I think that took up a lot of the conversation. As Hatisha said, it is very interesting when you make a recommendation for training, for example, and then you really don't get a response, and now we're starting to get responses. And if we make a recommendation for training and you just call us and say, well, you know, that's not part of our training document, they did this because this is in our policy. If you just tell us that right from the beginning, we won't sit for 6 months saying, why aren't you listening to our recommendations? So I think a lot of things got cleared up, misunderstandings between the police department and the CRB, and how to better communicate so that we don't have those misunderstandings moving forward.
Yeah, I think the meetings are showing signs of being helpful. This, you know, this committee didn't exist for the last couple of years, and it's required by the city statute that there be a police liaison committee that our committee can meet with. So that's happening. We know what happens in those meetings is getting back to the chief. We know we're getting responses. As Renette said, we don't have agreement yet about whether there will be a public statement from both groups or what it might look like. We're going back and forth on what might be appropriate language if that is to happen. And there are concerns, I think, on both sides from the CRB and from the police department about what we might be able to, in fact, say together that we would agree on. So we won't sign anything until this board has had a chance to thoroughly review that.
And the points that, you know, are, again, we are encouraged about the fact that they are communicating with us and that we are having meetings and things of that nature. But we also have a long way to go, and we're not, you know, ready to say, oh, yes, everything's great. And, you know what I mean, things of that nature that, you know what I mean, would hurt our, hurt us in the eyes of the public, and also for them to not think like, oh, okay, they did enough and they're not going to continue to work. So we are really making sure that this is something that we, it won't bite us in the, you know what I mean, in the back, in the long end, and also it doesn't put us in a situation, because as we know, we have lawsuits coming and things of that nature, and I'm very cautious about certain things that may call into question as to whether or not they are doing particular things. So let's just put it that way. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that we are looking at this thoroughly. We are thinking about the importance of it. We are thinking about the ramifications of it. And again, we will not do it if it's not in the best interest of the board, and it's not something that we can live with down the road that won't make it seem like we don't need a CRB, you know, and that's one of my real concerns. I will tell you that my concern is that if we don't want it to be perceived as if everything's great and there's no need for a CRB, or that everything's great and we don't still have issues in the community with regard to policing. So we are making sure we take all of that into consideration.
Okay. I think we've concluded our board business for tonight. We have a representative of a community organization here who has asked for 5 to 10 minutes to speak. So before we open to public comment, Yusuf, would you like to speak?
I've had to use the bathroom for a very long time, so I will definitely be less than 5 to 10 minutes. I do want to give you all just, you know, what I'm going to be speaking on. And so there's a signed copy. If you could please give it to Raina so she can have it as an official copy for the organization. Actually, here's a signed copy.
Okay. So you two.
want to thank Peter, the chair, for the invitation to come and speak to you all today. Ms. Bronson, we got to talk. We just got to talk. It's always a pleasure to be here. It's been some time, and I apologize that there's been some time. But it truly is, you are doing important work, and I have seen the CRB make significant changes over the years, and I want to commend you for those changes. If you need extra copies, I have a few more.
Let me get one more, brother.
Yeah. So, in front of you, you have testimony that I'm going to be providing to you and likely to the Common Council at some point in the future in an expanded format. But to give you a little bit about who I am, I'm the director of the New York Civil Liberties Union. The New York Civil Liberties Union respectfully submits the following testimony in support of the passage of two bills collectively known as the Right to Know Act. The NYCLU is the state affiliate of the American Civil Liberties Union and is a not-for-profit, nonpartisan organization with offices across the state and nearly 80,000 members and supporters. The NYCLU's mission is to defend and promote the fundamental principles, rights, and constitutional values embodied in the Bill of Rights of the United States Constitution and the Constitution of the State of New York. Protecting the rights of Syracuse residents to be free from discriminatory and abusive tactics in law enforcement is a core component of our mission, and we advocate for these rights through our legal, legislative, and advocacy work. In 2010, the Common Council took an important step toward improving the quality of policing in Syracuse by commissioning a study of police-citizen encounters. While the findings revealed what many already knew, that there was racial bias in police stops, it was an important measure that was needed to begin to address the long history of mistrust between communities of color and the police. Indeed, the following year, the Common Council took another extraordinary step by reinstituting and enhancing the then defunct Citizens Review Board, of which I am addressing here today. Despite these victories, though, the work remains unfinished, necessitating our collective advocacy for the passage of two companion bills that would improve communication, transparency, and accountability in everyday interactions between police officers and civilians. These bills will soon be before the Council as the Right to Know Act. To explain them, the first is an ID bill that would require SPD officers to identify themselves at the start of a law enforcement encounter and provide an explanation as to why the encounter is taking place. This is important as the studies commissioned by the Council indicate that there are racial disparities in who is stopped, but don't necessarily provide clarity as to why they were being stopped, if the stops were lawful, or if they violated the Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable search and seizure. From what advocates and community members say, citizens are often stopped and searched without knowing why, and the perception is that it may not always be for a legitimate law enforcement reason. That is why the second bill, which would require officers to obtain proof of informed consent before searching a person without legal justification, is also needed. This summer, our community experienced a number of incidents regarding police-citizen encounters that raised concern and focused efforts on reform. The viral video of the stop and arrest of Mr. Shaolin Moore and Mr. Yamil Osorio resonated across the community, galvanizing activism and public outcry. Advocates and organizers, activists, and community members worked together to push the administration towards releasing information relevant to this incident and developing ways to hold police accountable. This case exemplifies the need for such legislation, and while more work is to be done, these two bills will begin to address the long-standing view that if you are black or brown in Syracuse, SPD officers can stop you for any reason and you have to simply comply. We believe passionately that the time has come for the Common Council to continue the important work they've embarked upon by the passage of the Right to Know Act. We know that the CRB has been a place for identifying the policy pitfalls and police accountability and transparency, and thank you for the work you're doing in this regard. We are intimately cognizant of your role as an accountability and review board of SPD, and know that you don't have the power to pass legislation. Nevertheless, We do recognize your role in being a convener of matters that would promote better policing practices, and thank you for the invitation to speak on the Right to Know Act. As a member of SPARC, the Syracuse Police Accountability and Reform Coalition, I can affirm that we are working collaboratively with a spectrum of stakeholders who are trying to move the issues of police accountability and reform forward, and believe that we have the support of the council and the community on this issue. Through our collective action, we hope that the council convenes a public safety committee meeting to discuss these and other police matters, and believe this should be done before this council session concludes. We believe the administration is taking steps towards addressing these issues by sharing the SPD use of force policy, though not perfect, by releasing the noise ordinance, though it needs to be changed, by sharing the plain language of Civil Rights Law 50A, which is pretty clear, and are looking towards and are looking forward. SPARC is looking forward to their forthcoming release of the SPD union contract, which we asked and we hope would be released. More work, though, must be done. In conclusion, if we are to do better, if we are going to balance law enforcement concerns with the civil rights and liberties of Syracusans, if we're going to begin to heal and create trust between police and communities that they are sworn to protect and serve, the passage of these bills are needed and important steps forward in the community's fight for a fairer, more just SPD. They are not silver bullets, but are important measures towards obtaining better police-citizen encounters. I yield the remaining of my time and am open for any questions from the CRB and citizens that are here today. Thank you, and I'm available for questions if you have any.
Yusef, are we able to get a copy of, I know what's happened in New York City.
Yes.
But are we able to get a copy of what is going to be the proposed legislation for Syracuse?
Yeah, Andrew, do you think that's okay if we share the proposed legislation? I will make sure that we get you a copy of the proposed legislation. And just to be clear, this isn't just a bill that passed in New York City. This is a bill that passed in Kingston, New York, which is a small jurisdiction, not in New York City, in the lower Hudson Valley. Albany also has similar legislation they passed. And so I don't want people to think that, well, it's New York City and it's a different beast and it can't be done elsewhere. It actually has been done elsewhere across the state. And in fact, if we did this measure, we would be far more, we'd have a higher standard than New York City would have. I remember earlier in this discussion, you were talking about CRBs across the country, and you were saying that some are not as good as this and some are better, and it's a lot of perspective. And one of the board members, I believe it was you, Cliff, said, but we want to be the gold standard. And this would give Syracuse the opportunity to be that gold standard. We've had a number of problems. I mean, I suspect probably why you got a larger amount of response in August was because of the ridiculous amount of issues we saw in June and July around use of force issues. In the public's mind, the CRB is becoming something that people are realizing is a venue that they've got to go to. And so we have to do better, and this provides an opportunity to do so.
It'll become law?
It would be a city law, yes.
That's very important right there. I commend you on that because we really need those changes. And now I understand, going about getting those changes, which is something that I think I had spoke on before. But now I understand it's got to go through the legislators in order to become law, so that the police have to comply with it. Correct?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we've found to be the case, NYCLU and SPARC, is that the public just doesn't understand why, if what we can clearly see with our own two eyes, why it's very difficult for an officer to be held accountable. That incident, for me, the nuance of it, I understand because we're steeped in this. I know that the union contract doesn't have that as a fireable offense.
My next question.
Right, and so when you have a policy that allows officers to behave in a certain way, and when you have a union contract that says that this is not a fireable offense, this is an offense that can be disciplined, that if the CRB makes a recommendation that it doesn't have to be followed through, that's why it isn't enacted. What would make this different, though, is that a policy can change laws can change as well, but the law is what the legislative body comes together and says, here's how we're going to organize our community, and here are the laws that we expect every citizen to be upholding. And in this case, here's how we expect our police department to behave. I think it's really important that we pass this legislation. I think, again, I'm not saying that it's going to solve all of the problems. It's not going to do that. But in an array of different policies and legislation, it can begin to build more trust. It would reduce the likelihood of incidences that Mr. Moore and Ms. Osorio experienced, two people of whom are being prosecuted really for having their music loud. It's an annoyance. You maybe not want to hear it, but it shouldn't result in someone being arrested and put in jail. It shouldn't result in someone being prosecuted. It's a waste of taxpayer dollars. It's a waste of everyone's time. And really what it does is it shows that if a person can be arrested and treated in this way for being stopped, but an officer can kill someone and never be held accountable, then where is the standards that we have as a community? Whose lives do we value? And these are the types of reasons that we want to create as many mechanisms that we can to protect citizens in our community. If there are no other, sorry, please, I can stand here probably for 5 more minutes. I gotta go to the bathroom. But I'm available to listen to any questions you have.
I totally understand where you're coming from, and I can talk to you about questions off the record, at some other time after I finish reading the legislation and things of that nature, but I understand where you're coming from. And so I thank you for taking the time and including the CRB in this measure. It really makes me feel good that the community continues to see us as an important mechanism, and that you would take the time to bring this to us and seek our support and things of that nature. It means a lot because we continue to try to build that trust in the community and continue to try to let the community know that we're available, and it's good to know that people are seeing that and they continue to support us. So thank you.
Absolutely. One other thing, I know you have a question. One thing I'll say is I think NYCLU, Spark, and our partners, we believe in the CRB, and if you don't know, we really are advocating behind the scenes oftentimes, but also publicly for the CRB. We recognize the value that you bring and that you're all citizens who are here to represent citizens. You're not paid to do this work, you're volunteers. You're here committing your time to really do what's right. And often we are here yelling at you, and there probably will be a time where that may happen again. But today, I am also here to celebrate you because we do recognize the efforts that you are taking. I am completely cognizant again, and I think our team is completely cognizant that this is in some respects not in your wheelhouse in that you don't author legislation. But we are also cognizant that as a group that talks about how can we do policing better, we should be having a conversation with you. We should be having that dialogue. We should be engaging with you to let you know what we are planning. And also we are going to be having and ramping up a significant campaign around this issue because we believe passionately that this community has to do this. We cannot allow what happened this summer to continue to happen. We cannot allow the amount of taxpayer dollars on lawsuits to continue to happen. We can't allow for people to fear being stopped by a police officer. I am educated, I'm the director of ACLU, and every time I see flashing lights, my heart beats ridiculously crazy. And that shouldn't be my reality. In watching one of the documentaries this summer when they see us, by Ava DuVernay, I couldn't watch every episode. I stopped after the first episode and almost I don't want a son. Because as a black man, the reality of my son being put in that reality is very high, irrespective of whether or not you're a good kid. And we always tell people, if you just comply, the Fourth Amendment is the Fourth Amendment. It's not about whether or not you comply or not. It's about whether or not the Constitution is equally afforded to everyone, period. Yes, in order to survive the encounter, I have to comply. But should that be our reality? Should that be how we engage in our society? Should some of our citizens be given different sets of rules than others? That's not what our Constitution is about. That's not what a just society is about. That's not what we should be about. And we have a chance to be a better community. Sorry, Peter.
Do you have any sense or information about how the implementation of this law is going in large or small cities in New York?
Yeah, so I've had conversations with some of my colleagues. So the bill in New York is not as strong as our bill. Advocates are happy in the sense that there are more measures than there were before. As you know, New York was notorious for stop and frisk. We have our own version of stop and frisk in Syracuse. It's not called stop and frisk. It's just done in a different way, but it's in effect the same type of thing. It's kind of what I referenced in my testimony about the council has commissioned studies that have proven this, and every successive study that has happened since that point has proven that there is still this discriminatory stopping and searching in this community. And so we know it for a fact. CRB data tells us how this happens, and we know this for a fact. And so we know that it's the problem. So to your question, I'm going to make sure to look at and give you information from those jurisdictions. And in fact, when we do call upon the council to have a public safety committee, we're hoping that those who were a part of that effort in New York City, in Kingston, in Albany, and also across the state could also be present. And we're trying to communicate with advocates at CPR, which is Communities United for Police Reform, which is a statewide kind of grassroots organization, so that they can talk about the lessons that they've learned from the passage of the legislation across the state and how we could do it better. That said, ours is and would be the strongest. And it's really a simple bill. I mean, it's two very simple bills. One says, I should know why I'm being stopped, which is kind of crazy, and I should be able to get a business card so that if this stop isn't lawful, that I can go to somewhere to complain, which would be the CRB. That's all we're asking for. We're not saying officers have to stop policing. We're not saying that we should dismantle the police department. We're saying people should know why they're searched and why they're stopped, and to provide consent for a search. It doesn't stop legitimate law enforcement searches from happening. It doesn't stop if there is a warrant for someone to be able to have that warrant enacted upon them. We know that if I'm walking down the street and the officer says, come here, and he pats me down and does a strip search, which happens very frequently in this community, that shouldn't happen. And those types of encounters would be reduced is the goal of this legislation.
One more. Will there be any opposition from the union?
Oh, I mean, absolutely there's going to be opposition. The union is opposed to any reform. There isn't a reform that the union wouldn't be opposed to. But I would say, in counter to that, the union is a nonprofit organization. It's an interest group. It represents the interests of the police officers. It doesn't necessarily represent the interests of the citizens of Syracuse. And I'm not suggesting that police officers are against citizens. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying the interest of the union president is to protect and maintain the jobs of his employees. And anything that could begin to put that at risk is something that he's going to be against. And I can foresee him being against this. And I think we're prepared, which is why we're going through the exercise of going to every single person who has a stake in this issue. We've gone to the police department and we've had a conversation. We've gone to the mayor's office. We've gone to the council. We will lobby, like we bring people to Albany to lobby. We will lobby. We will send phone calls. We will put advertisements on Facebook. We will hold rallies. We will do everything that we need to begin to reassert the balance of power in this community. For too long, the union has had all of the power. And that's not doing any of us a service. And so we're willing to push back on that. We're also trying to do it in a very diplomatic way. We're having and doing the diligence to make sure that we're reaching out to people, to have a conversation, to engage people in the conversation, to talk with counselors. But if we need to pull that button to say, let's go, we're prepared. And we're prepared to do it in every forum that we have to do it, because we believe in this passionately, and the community, we're confident, is behind us. If you noticed from the first police forum, there were hundreds of people that were there. That wasn't accidental. People organized and had conversations, and groups that don't agree with each other, that don't actually like each other, that may not partner with each other, were in a room, spent 3 hours, and we talked about what we're going to do collectively to make sure that we galvanize the community. And I think we will be able to do so. My hope is, and our expectation is, that the wisdom of this legislation would win the day, that the wisdom of why we need this policy and why we need this legislation is going to be speaking on its own, and that we won't need to have to go to those measures, but by any means necessary.
Other questions?
Thank you.
Yusuf, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Other members of the public who wish to comment?
One moment. Just say something, one moment. If everybody will recall, we had, I'm wearing a purple scarf for a reason today. If you recall, Kevin Donovan came to our meeting a while ago with regard to Narcan, with regard to the opiate addiction, and police officers being equipped with that drug in order to save a life, in a sense, of someone who was overdosed. I attended his funeral today. He succumbed to opiates and passed away this past Saturday. So I just want to, state for the record that we appreciate the work that he has done. We appreciate him coming to the board, seeking our assistance with regard to that, and the fight continues with regard to that. And I just wanted to, say his name out loud in terms of the fact that he was doing some good work, and it's a continuous struggle. And so that's all.
Thank you. We are open for public comment. Would any members of the public like to say anything? You look familiar.
I look very familiar. Thank you again for allowing me to speak. I wanted to make a few comments about the discussion that happened earlier. I appreciate the concerns that were raised about private investigators. I can appreciate both sides of the perspective that was shared. I think there has been legitimate criticism of the CRB. Let me back up. There has been criticism that I don't necessarily find to be legitimate about the professionalism of the CRB, which is problematic. And I don't agree with that criticism. I think you all are professional. I think the legislation is pretty clear as to what your policies and practices are, as to how you should engage. I think that because you're working and because you're working effectively, there's an interest to make sure that you remove that capacity. And so there is this position that has been put forward to say that the CRB is not professional and therefore we need to professionalize the CRB. I find that to be problematic. I think in one sense, utilizing the private investigator that was put forth, and I'm not here to advise or not, I just want to express, I think, the challenges in that conversation that I've heard. Utilizing a private investigator that has an extensive law enforcement history presents opportunities in that it helps to reduce that kind of criticism that exists. But on the other hand, when you've been that entrenched in the system, it's very difficult for you to begin to look objectively. It's very difficult because you're trained to look at things a certain way, and it's very difficult for you to begin to look at how do we have a different vision for moving forward. I've been here many times where I've heard people say, this is how it should be, and I've had to push back to say, that's not what the law says. That's not what the courts say. It's been pretty clear as to what was litigated and what a judge determined. You have independent subpoena power. You don't need to ask people for permission. When a judge says that, it's settled. There's no more opinions that a law firm needs to author you because it's clear as day. It has already been litigated in court. Whenever anyone comes to you and tells you otherwise, it's because they have a different agenda. And I appreciate the agendas that they have, and the agenda is to reduce the liability of the city of Syracuse. Well, you reduce the liability of the city of Syracuse by stop having officers behaving in the ways that they do. You reduce the liabilities of the city of Syracuse by having higher practices for policies. You reduce the liabilities on the city of Syracuse by passing legislation like the ones I put forward. You reduce the liabilities of the city of Syracuse by having a union contract that isn't as deplorable as the one that we have today. Now, there are efforts that the administration, to be fair to them, are doing to try to begin to fix those issues, and they've inherited a lot of this. And so we are giving them an opportunity to show that they're interested in trying to do the work of the people. I believe confidently that they're interested in doing the work of the people. I have had conversations with the administration and I have seen some of those efforts come to fruition. But I will tell you, attorneys' jobs are to tell you about the liabilities of cities. That is going to be their interest, that is what they're going to do, and they're not necessarily going to be completely committed to the interests of the people. Second point, about the training and the conversation with the police liaison committee. This is all in my notes in my head, so forgive me if I'm not pulling it up as quickly as I would like to. But about the police liaison committee conversations and the need to want to put forth a letter in support, I think it potentially undermines the CRB's position. I would never, as the NYCLU, put a letter with our name on it in support of the police department because it precludes my ability to be able to hold them accountable later on because I've now endorsed them. If you can write a letter that says that we see the efforts that are being made, and I appreciate the challenging situation that you're in because you have a department that is doing more than others have before. But what I find sometimes happens is that because people are doing more than what they've done before, we tend to want to celebrate them when they're not actually doing what they're supposed to do. Like, you don't get a cookie for doing your job. It's your job. The law says you give us this. We're not supposed to celebrate you for giving us this. That's what you're supposed to do. It's pretty clear, black and white. And I don't think people should be patted on the back for doing what you're supposed to do. If I do my job, I get a paycheck. I don't do my job, I get fired. If I'm a doctor and I can do a surgery and the surgery is successful, guess what? I did my job. I went to school to do that. And so I think we should begin to be more critical about what they're asking of you and how that can undermine you and undermine your ability to be a safeguard and a steward of the public's trust. Because without this entity, there is no trust in the police. And I'm constantly concerned that the police don't get it. People don't give witness testimony because you show up at their houses and threaten them. That's why they don't want to be witnesses. So I'm either threatened by a homeboy on the block or by the police. So I'm not going to do nothing. This is very simple. When 90+% of the police don't live in a community that they're supposed to protect and serve, they're not going to be understanding the types of challenges that people experience. And so I would be cautious in that. On the last thing about the LGBTQ policy, they've asked us to also comment, and I can share our comments. The LGBTQ policy it needs like a whole, there are terminologies in there that are problematic. There's a lack of basic understanding about LGBT communities before the policy can even be talked about. There's a need for education that has to happen first. And so I think that it's incumbent upon each of us to begin to engage in that education that has to happen before endorsing policies or actions and practices. Thank you for giving me the time to speak again. I again commend you for the efforts that you put forth and what you all are bringing to the table. This is the most diverse CRB I've ever seen. And I love that there's more women here. It overpower the men because we need to start listening to y'all more than we need to stop talking as much. And so in the interest of letting other people speak, I'm going to step back. But I'm very proud to see the diversity of the people that are here and really commend you all for the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf. Any other members of the public wish to speak?
You, young man with the plaid shirt on, would you like to speak? You in the first row.
Okay, I will like a motion from someone to go into executive session so that the board can discuss cases. Would someone make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
I second it.
And made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we will adjourn to our other room for our executive session. Thank you to the members of the public.
I'll leave some of my cards here.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna